Hein? À tout le monde, bienvenue à la réunion numéro 17 du Comité permanent des langues officielles. Conformément à l'article 108.3F et à la motion adoptée le 23 octobre 2025, nous nous réunissons aujourd'hui pour terminer notre étude sur l'usage du français dans les communications gouvernementales et les institutions fédérales. J'aimerais maintenant souhaiter la bienvenue à nos témoins. Du commissariat aux langues officielles, nous avons M. Raymond Théberge, commissaire aux langues officielles. Bienvenue, M. Théberge. Patrick Wolf, commissaire adjointe, conformité et application de la loi. Bienvenue, M. Wolf. Pierre Leduc, commissaire adjoint, direction générale de l'orientation stratégique et des relations externes. Bienvenue. Et Matthew Croix-Toru, avocat principal. Est-ce que j'ai prononcé votre nom correctement? OK, merci beaucoup. Bienvenue. Et le commissaire aura 5 minutes pour prononcer son allocation d'ouverture. Ensuite, nous procéderons à une période de questions et réponses avec les membres du comité. Monsieur Théberge, la parole est à vous pour 5 minutes.
Merci. Monsieur le Président, honorables membres du comité, bonjour. Je tiens à reconnaître que les terres sur lesquelles nous sommes réunis font partie du territoire traditionnel non cédé du peuple Anishinaabe-Algonquin, un peuple autochtone de la vallée de l'Outaouais. L'étude que vous entamez sur la question de l'utilisation du français dans les communications gouvernementales et les institutions fédérales est d'une grande pertinence et j'aimerais vous en remercier. Au cours de mon mandat, vous m'avez souvent entendu dire que le bilinguisme est une compétence essentielle pour tout leader, que ce soit en politique, au sein de la fonction publique fédérale ou même dans le secteur privé. Je suis conscient que la loi sur les langues officielles impose des obligations aux institutions fédérales et non aux individus. Ce sont les institutions qui doivent garantir que leur communication officielle, y compris les discours du Premier ministre, soient accessibles dans les 2 langues officielles. Toutefois, même si la loi ne prévoit pas l'obligation personnelle pour le Premier ministre, il demeure souhaitable qu'il incarne ce symbole de l'identité canadienne.
Symbol of Canadian identity and linguistic equality in his daily duties.
Promotion of both official languages starts at the top. In other words, senior managers must lead by example through their actions. When they actively use both official languages, they encourage others to follow suit and contribute to the creation of an organizational culture that values French as much as English. It's clear that much work remains to be done to create a truly bilingual public service. During the last fiscal year, 255 admissible complaints related to language of work were filed with my office. And I believe that this is just the tip of the iceberg. Many public servants are still reluctant to file a complaint when their language rights are infringed for fear of damaging their work relationships. Of course, I'm pleased to see the amendments to the Act that came into force on June 20th, which confirmed the right of federal public servants to work in the official language of their choice in regions designated as bilingual for language of work purposes, regardless of the linguistic identification of their position. Le secrétariat du Conseil du Trésor a également
The Treasury Board of Canada Secretariat also raised the minimum second language proficiency requirement for supervisory positions where the incumbents supervise employees in regions designated as bilingual for language of work purposes. However, I'm still concerned about what might happen to employees who are supervised by incumbents of unilingual supervisory positions or by incumbents who do not meet the CBC's second language requirement. Federal institutions will have to ensure that measures are taken and maintained to protect the language rights of the employees in question. All too often, French is neglected in government communications, and federal institutions relegate French to a language of translation rather than strive for the substantive equality of both official languages. The 766 admissible complaints filed with my office in 2024-2025 for breaches related to communications with and services to the public are proof of this. Yet the Modernized Act is very clear. Given the precarious situation of the French language across the country, we must do more to protect it. Leaders and senior managers of institutions must therefore send a clear signal that English and French both occupy a prominent and equal place within the federal public service, even in this time of budget cuts.
Proposed administrative and monetary penalties regulations that were recently tabled in Parliament. My team and I have conducted an in-depth analysis in order to fully understand the potential impact of the regulations on Canadians, members of the official language minority communities, and my office's operations. As you may have read in our position paper, which was sent to you last week, I'm pleased to see that many of the elements we recommended have been included in the proposed regulations. However, I'm concerned about some of the elements that have been put forward. For example, before being able to impose an administrative monetary penalty, my office will have to follow what seems to be a very time-consuming process, in particular because of the addition of several criteria to be considered and the obligation to justify the reasoning and methodology for each criterion. Expectations are high for the modernized federal language policy, and it's essential that the government make every effort to meet them. I therefore invite the government to take into account the considerations I've outlined in my document so that the regulations have the potential to fully meet the objectives of the Modernized Act. I hope that my successor will have the opportunity to discuss this further with you during your in-depth study of the proposed regulations. The same also goes for the proposed regulations for Part 7 of the Act tabled earlier this week, which deal with the advancement of equality of status and use of English and French. My team and I will analyze them in more detail in the coming days. Je vous remercie de votre attention et je...
Thank you for your attention. I'm now ready to answer your questions, which you're welcome to ask in the official language of your choice. Thank you very much, Mr. Theberge. We'll start with our first round of questions. Mr. Godin, 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. First off, Mr. Commissioner, I'll tell you that I'm very happy to see you back here. I'll take advantage of the opportunity to wish you an excellent retirement, if there isn't a prolongation, and it was a pleasure for me to work with you. This morning, we're not necessarily here to talk about the regulations on AMPs. We're here to talk about what happened this fall after a Radio Canada article. The article pointed out that the Prime Minister didn't speak a lot of French. Beyond the percentage, there was also the qualitative aspect. I'd like to give you the ability, before you leave, if you were the president of the Treasury Board and president of Heritage, what would you have done after that article came out? I'm talking about both of them because, you know, there's some confusion, and unfortunately we weren't able to have a central agency on C-13. That came into force June 2023. So I'm giving you those instant powers. Treasury Board, Heritage. What would you do? Because first off, I'll ask the question, and then I'll say, do you think it's acceptable? Do you think it's acceptable the way the Prime Minister is playing with the French language? Answer. Well, it's a lot of power to give me, I know. Inaudible. What I'd say is, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, it's really important that all leader, be it the Prime Minister, be it a minister, be it a high-level manager, be able to communicate in both official languages, and to do so equally. Because when we send a message in both official languages, we meet over 80% of Canadians. As I mentioned, the Act doesn't apply to individuals. However, it's really important that institutions that support people, that support individuals, be aware of their obligations. For instance, in 2020, during the pandemic, everyone's forgotten, but there was a pandemic. At that time, there were communications sent out from the government in one language. So we reached out to the responsible institutions, and we fixed that. So it's really important for those who support those individuals to ensure that they respect their obligations. Question. Easy question. You don't have a lot of time. Do you agree that the current Prime Minister uses French the way he currently uses it, following Radio Canada's article? Answer. I think the Prime Minister communicates more and more in French. I'll stop you there. Answer. Communicates more and more. That's quantitative. But Madame Tellier, who's a university professor, analyzed his remarks in French after the article came back, where it was pointed out that there was 17% in French. So he increased the percentage. But you know what he talked about when he was speaking French? He talked about things that aren't as important. That's what the university professor came to tell us about when she spoke before the committee. So there's qualitative and quantitative. How can we make the Prime Minister see that he ought to use the two languages equitably? And equitable doesn't necessarily mean equal. It means that they're used in a parity zone. How can we make sure the Prime Minister uses both languages equitably? In my opinion, the Prime Minister, like the Governor General, is an institution. They're a symbol. There's the individual who wears the hat of the institution, but that hat is the institution. So can we do something for the Prime Minister to hear reason and stop ignoring French? Answer. I'll come back to what I said earlier. I think it's very important that the Prime Minister, as other high-level representatives of Canada, be able to express themselves in both official languages in order to be heard by all Canadians. Question. I'll stop you there, Mr. Commissioner. In your opinion, is he playing his role? Is he assuming his role correctly? Is he respecting that? Answer. He's making efforts. He's made efforts over the last few months. But I think that the people around him must ensure that he is able to better communicate with Canadians in both official languages. Question. You also know that there was a minister who had a press conference in English. Another minister sent a press release in French with tons of errors in it. Do you think that's normal and acceptable? But we understand that if the Prime Minister, and above the Prime Minister, there's a Governor General who doesn't speak French, the Prime Minister, in the hierarchy, he's below the Governor General, and he doesn't use or value French. Isn't that an organizational issue? If at the head of the if at the top of the chain we don't lead by example, isn't that an issue? Answer. Well, it's about political will. The political will of putting the official languages in place in federal institutions, and that's not new. It's been an issue for years. Question. Well, the last 10 years. Sorry, your time is up. Thank you, Mr. Godin. Now, Madame Chanette, 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner, and your team for being here with us. First off, thank you so much for all of your years of services, and it's a privilege to have you. Short question. Do MPs and ministers, including the Prime Ministers, are they obliged to be bilingual? Under the Act, no. Question. That's what's important to remember at the moment. But there's a social norm. The social norm that aims at this bilingualism and this ability to communicate in both languages in order to really reinforce both official languages. I haven't been here for 10 years, but for around 35 years, I've been in executive roles throughout Canada in the private sector. Then I was a diplomat, and now I'm a politician. What I've noticed over the years is the private logic of constraint, because as a proud Quebecer who's worked in the rest of Canada, there weren't many people who spoke French 35 years ago. Now, there are a lot of people in the private sector who speak French, and I'll come back on what you said. It's not just a governmental question where we have to value our two official languages throughout our beautiful country. So having worked as an ambassador with various departments, this is my question. We learned that there was training, there are tests for managers so that they can speak both languages. According to you, if we want to go further in this vein, well, there's political will. I think the political will with what's been happening historically with our American neighbors, going from east to west, etc., the point will be to value our two official languages. The issue is that there's a culture People have to be proud to speak both official languages or to speak French. Beyond the punitive aspect, which is the commissioner's role, what else must we do in order to reinforce this culture and this pride in order to value languages? Answer. Our commissioner has two mandates. Compliance, first, so punitive. And then there's promotion, second mandate. Promotion of official languages among the federal institutions and among OLMCs. In the new version of the law, the goal of the law is to protect French, protect and promote French throughout the country and North America. That means we need to take measures implementing certain programs in order to facilitate learning French in school, in the whole education continuum. We also need to ensure that when the government communicates in both official languages, and within the federal government, French is really a working language. That's a challenge. It's a challenge because all too often there is a perception that we can just translate everything. That's not the only way to respect the act. People must be able to use French in communications and interactions with their colleagues within the federal service, with members of both official language communities. So there needs to be a French language presence, a visual presence as well, in announcements as well. So it must be seen and perceived. French must be seen to have a really important role in Canada. Question. In that vein, my strategic reflex, and of course we have to talk, my colleagues will mention what's going badly and what we have to improve, but tell me what has improved and what can we reinforce as a tool to reinforce this pride of sharing our two languages? Answer. So it's not the story of the last 50 years, but let's say there's been some progress in the federal government, creating official bilingual jobs, etc. Before, there was a lot of training. Now, training is an issue because of budget cuts. So if we can increase this ability in the federal government to make sure that there's more training, more linguistic training, then people will be able to perform in their second official language at work. I'll also come back to what I said earlier. In the past, we did promotion campaigns. We do that less and less. Promotion campaigns on the importance of bilingualism. There was a great game, the Canada Game. There were millions of versions of it that we sent out in the 70s? 70s? Yeah. And that was done by the government, not by the commissioner. The commissioner has a little role in terms of promotion. So it's important to grow what we have and not go backwards. Too often, when there are budget cuts, decisions are made regarding cuts, regarding language training. And those decisions have an impact on official languages.
Your time is up. Thank you. Thank you, Madame Chenette. Mr. Beaulieu, you have 6 minutes.
I say.
Right at a time of distress for the French language in Quebec, it is under threat and is the only francophone state in all of North America and in Canada. In your report, you said that you were concerned for Anglophones in Quebec. Why do you constantly favor Anglophones in Quebec? I do not systematically favor Anglophones in Quebec. We favor equally both official language minority communities. Essentially, that's the same thing. It's defined by province, so Anglophones in Quebec. Under the Official Languages Act, there are 2 communities that are in a minority setting, and in Quebec, they will be English-speaking communities. They are official language minority communities. Also, In the study we conducted on that community, we noticed that they wanted to fully take part in the success of Quebec, and we noticed that a large majority of these people actually do speak French. It might be important to want to defend a large majority, that is 69.8%, based on Statistics Canada data. Even in Montreal, their francophones speak more English.
Verse. Si on regarde à
More so, francophones speak English more so than the other way around. Bilingualism is declining all throughout the country, except in Quebec, where it's increasing. I don't think English-speaking communities are at risk. Would you agree that there is a decline in French throughout Canada and in Quebec? I've said so, and I fully agree with you. Under the new Act, under C-13, the Governor and Council is also responsible for protecting French, and the number of sections were passed. Does that change anything? Based on your comments, it seems like you're always repeating the same concept, which is official language minority communities. That is the nature of C-13. It's asymmetrical. On the one hand, we say that the purpose of the Act is to protect and promote French on the one hand. On the other hand, we continue to recognize the existence of two official language minority communities. To respond to your question, in fact, you had asked it last time. Today, if I look at the government's initiatives for the implementation of that part of the Act, I don't see any program or initiative underway, but I think this is kind of initiative that needs to be the subject of discussions between these orders of government. Lawyers who appeared and work with francophones outside of Quebec note that there's a violation by the government itself of its own act. The idea is to promote French in Quebec as well, and nothing's actually happening. It seems as though it's a default setting and you can't change it. You systematically speak to this issue. You spoke against Bill 96, and there are twice as many students in Anglophone cégeps than the number of Anglophones, and whereas it's the opposite in the rest of Canada. The demographic weight is not represented in those schools. We did not... Microphone, please. Question. I'll find you that information. If you look at language obligations, much was made of Mr. Carney not speaking French. There have been comments about the Governor General, who still doesn't speak French for 55 years now. It's the Commissioner of Official Languages that's been repeating the same complaints, and we're not seeing much progress. There's growing assimilation of francophones. Do you think it's about time for commissioners to speak more affirmatively, more aggressively about this? The legislation determines the limits of our work, and that is why some of the regulations that you will be dealing with in the coming months and week are really crucial for the implementation of C-13. Specifically, Part 7, that has to do with communities and the promotion and protection of French. Question, inaudible? Not much will change when you look at the findings and the consultations. You're still constantly consulting with the same Anglophone groups in Quebec. Yes, quickly. Recently, we spoke to officials from Canadian Heritage. We were addressing linguistic obligations and how there should be a more rigorous process. The same thing is something you noted the same thing. 95% of bilingual positions involve self-assessment, and apparently people are bilingual in these positions, but it's a self-assessment. The public service has to respect some targets. And I will count on the assertions made by the Commissioner of the Public Service. Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. Colleagues? Second round of questions. Mr. Dalton, you have 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Monsieur Thiberge, for so many years of work as the Commissioner for Official Languages and for your work. It's very important work. We appreciate your contribution. You said that it starts at the top, the importance of valuing both official languages. The head of the organization is the Prime Minister in this case. And he sets the example. He just replaced the Minister for Culture and Canadian Identity, minister responsible for official languages. Stephen Guilbeault has been replaced by Mark Miller. That's right, Mark Miller. It's interesting because the first comments that he issued once he had received the position was that he was fed up. He was just fed up with the debate about the decline in French in Canada, and that was enough. Do you think there is a decline in the use of French in Canada? I said it earlier. If you strictly look at Statistics Canada figures as to the first official language spoken or learned, clearly since 1971, from 1970 to today, there's been a decline in Canada and in Quebec. We need to realize that this decline needs to be addressed. We have a Francophone immigration policy in place that aims to respond to this decline. But you need to be ambitious. If you seriously want to restore that target, 6.1% of Francophone immigration outside of Quebec, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Now it's 9% per year. We'll never get to that 60%. The figures, I mean, my time is short, so you seem to be in agreement that there is a decline, that things need to be done. Mark Miller is an issue, but it's the fact that the Prime Minister put this individual in charge of this major responsibility. There are many Liberals who speak French. Mark Miller, yes, he speaks French. But to have a person like him in this role, I think it speaks to the Liberals and the Prime Minister's attitude. And there are other examples of this. Just look at the number of French language courses he's taken. I mean, I know he speaks French, but he can improve his French just like I can. In June, he took one French class. Actually, two. In August, one. But in September, apparently there was a problem with hiring a tutor for the Prime Minister. Didn't even have anyone to teach him French. I don't know if he hired anyone else. The patent lack of effort. Even according to Radio-Canada, he's only speaking 17% of the time in French. That's less than all the other previous prime ministers. What message does that send out to the world and to the Francophone communities in this country? You have 30 seconds left. I'll repeat. What is important is to make sure that our leaders can communicate in both official languages, and to take that, they need to take the necessary means to do so. And that means the institutions that support the Prime Minister, in this case, need to make sure that he is in a position to communicate with Canadians in the official languages of their choice. Madam Ingurelli, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being here. My first question in compliance with linguistic obligations, if you consider your mandate as a whole, how would you assess general compliance of the Government of Canada with respect to the obligation to communicate in both official languages? It's difficult to grade the government. As a former professor, I think I could, but what's important is that over the last few years, there have been significant changes that happen. The Official Languages Act's modernization is an important aspect. Now, with respect to the implementation thereof, that's where we're going to be able to determine if they're serious or not. There's the Official Languages Action Plan that's also there to support official language minority communities. So there has been progress. Last year, we know that supervisors were required to reach CDC level in designated bilingual regions for the purposes of language of work. And that's important. That being said, there still are issues with compliance. We receive a number of complaints, a significant number of complaints every year. There's some work to be done. Still now in 2025, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And it's quite surprising to see that people say, do we have to do that? Is that an obligation? Well, now, it's been an obligation for 50 years. Come on, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. We haven't gotten to the point where the public service is sincerely bilingual and can operate in both official languages. Yes, there has been progress. And as a commissioner, I always need to look at progress. Yes, it's a step-by-step process. In English, they say, they talk about home runs, but I can't say we've got too many home runs in official languages. I can say that we've reached some of the bases, but it's very slow. You raised a number of issues during the pandemic. Outside of that exceptional period, do you note that federal institutions generally respect their obligations? Generally speaking, yes. But you need some nuance to the statement because there still is a lot of work to be done in terms of compliance. There's still, with respect to language of work and communication and delivery of services to the public, the number of complaints have not dropped. There was a year where there was a drop in the number of complaints, and we were hopeful. But now it looks like we're going to still be getting a significant number of complaints this year, like we have in the last few years. How can I say this? There is improvement, but there's still room for improvement. Thank you. How much time do I have left, Mr. Chair? 1 minute, 40 seconds. Very well. The Official Languages Act, does it involve specific obligations for language skills of ministers, members, the Prime Minister, or is it really an institutional agreement or a political understanding? We don't impose bilingualism on individuals under the Act. Okay, I think that answers the question. Otherwise, is there a legal framework that is clearly set out for the bilingualism of public office holders? No, not at all. Inaudible? Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mingarelli. Mr. Beaulieu, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you. We were referring to language obligations. Some people said one of the problems, especially for senior officials, is that when you have requirements for knowledge of French, sometimes they hire English staff, And the pretext is that they will learn French eventually, but then they take a class and then they don't work any further at improving their French. What do you think of the idea of having this as a criterion for hiring? What do you think of that? I support that criterion 100%. In the Act today, there is a section that specifies that any senior official, deputy minister or assistant deputy minister must become bilingual. But I'm not clear as to how you can assure compliance at that level. It's always been our position that for these levels of position, the bilingualism is essential. That's right. So the fact that there seems to be the government is at a standstill. I mean, even at this committee, we haven't managed to get this proposal passed. It doesn't seem to be any political will to ensure that senior officials are truly bilingual. A nuance. Most deputy ministers are from the pool of assistant deputy ministers, and assistant deputy ministers fall under the bilingual requirements proficiency. To what extent are both official languages being used in the workplace? It's one thing to say you've reached the level. This is not self-assessment. You have to pass tests within the Public Service Commission, from the Public Service Commission's tests. But if you reach a level and you're satisfied by that, but you don't actually work in the second language, generally we're talking about French here, not English. It's getting back to what I was saying earlier. I think it sends a message. Is it a cultural issue that's been in place for a long time? Mr. Beaulieu, you have 10 seconds. I was happy to hear you say it's always about French, because in these reports we always hear about bilingualism, and it's hard to really understand for those tuning in what it means. Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu.
Mr. Gaudin, 5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Commissioner, my colleagues from the Liberal Party tried to raise the point that it's not obligatory to be bilingual to be Prime Minister. That's true. But it's not because it's not obligatory that morally, among other things, the Prime Minister ought to lead by example. In your opinion, does the Prime Minister take the necessary steps to promote the two official languages equitably? Answer. In that regard, we've seen, for instance, that Canada will host the Francophonie in 2028. The Prime Minister has taken actions for the Francophonie. At the moment, I think that official languages, given our current context, the socio-economic and socio-political context, official languages must assume its place. It's clear there are many priorities that are not necessarily official languages. We must work very hard to make sure official languages has a place. I think regarding what you mentioned earlier, yes, individuals are not named in the law. Question. My question is simple. Did the Prime Minister take the necessary actions to equitably support and promote the two official languages in the last 8 months? Answer. I'm not able to respond to that question. Thank you. I'll ask you another question. You've been in your role for around 10 years. We worked together to modernize the Act. An MP from Montreal worked behind the scenes against Bill 95. He was appointed as Minister of Identity and Culture last week, and he's responsible for official languages. Bill 96, rather. Do you think that's okay? And what signal does that send? the fact that French is in a very vulnerable situation, and the Prime Minister appoint a minister who worked hard against Bill 96 in Montreal, working against Francophones, and he's the Minister of Official Languages. Do you think that's acceptable? What signal does that send to Canadians? Answer. I'm unable to comment on that situation. I don't know the reasons behind an appointment. Question. A political analyst, Madame Lefebvre, mentioned this on TVA. She mentioned that Mr. Miller worked against his colleague Mélanie Joly because Mélanie Joly had that job and tabled a white paper mentioning the central agency. But Mark Miller, behind the scenes, worked against her and others who were working for Francophones. Because Mark Miller took that position, is that why he was chosen by Prime Minister Carney? Answer. I cannot comment. Question, but you follow the news. Answer, yes, but I'm not aware of all that. Question, is that because it's outside of your purview as commissioner? Answer, yes. Question, okay, Mr. Commissioner, I appreciate that you're being frank. Given all your information and the indicators that are available to you, can you tell us that the new Prime Minister, who's been here since April, has shown will and intention to value French and to use French on the same level as English in a bilingual country? I'll repeat it, French and English, because his predecessor appointed a governor general who is bilingual but does not speak French. Has the current Prime Minister shown that he has that will? Very quick question. Response, time is up. Response, it's an interesting question and I don't have an answer for you. Inaudible. Mr. de Chantariot, 5 minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you for your many years of leadership and promotion of official languages. It's strange to have you at this committee because it'll be your last appearance in committee. When I was studying political science at the University of Moncton, you had just come into your role. We're talking about official languages today. In order to raise the bar, we need to lead by example. We recently tabled the regulation on AMPs in the House. In your opinion, how will this regulation increase the ability of the Commissioner to ensure the compliance with the Act? Do you have any comments? Answer, yes. It's a key tool in our toolbox, especially regarding transport. However, as is said in the document we sent out, something that worries us is how cumbersome the administrative process is. That is, to administer AMPs. There are many regulations that are much lighter, much less cumbersome. For us, that's a huge workload to be able to impose an AMP. I think that needs to be reviewed. The process that we are subject to, that's just incredibly cumbersome. Question, the use of French. One must be rigorous in businesses, including Air Canada. Air Canada received many complaints. AMPs can go from $25,000 to $50,000. Can the fact that fines can be repeatedly imposed Do you think that will have a real deterrent effect so that administrations will take their linguistic obligations seriously? Answer: I don't think any business wants to get AMPs, so they'll make the necessary effort. The deterrent is interesting because for each violation, so if there are 300 violations, well, but before getting to an AMP, you have to jump through a lot of hoops. Question: I'll comment on something else. Last week, you tabled a report on the official languages and the action plan. That's one of the government's main tools to promote both official languages. In 2023, there was an historic investment, the largest in the history of the country. At the end of the document, in your conclusion, you invite us to not interrupt funding. Because this is your last appearance, I'd like you to talk more about that. Answer: very often there's funding that's given to provinces or organizations over a 5-year period. That's part of the action plan. The action plan is ending, and we haven't put a new action plan in place. So that's an interruption in funding. Or, for instance, in terms of education, that funding will end. This is what's important. The action plan needs a permanent aspect. Yes, it's a 5-year plan. But there should be a certain continuity within the action plan. So it's really important to make sure that when there's an action plan over a limited number of years, that there's a transition. The action plan also needs to take suggestions into account, the suggestions in our report. 30 seconds. At the end, you also mentioned you needed to adapt to changing needs and to the different needs of communities across the country. Can you speak to that? Answer: every community is different and have their own needs. New Brunswick isn't Manitoba, and Manitoba isn't BC. One must be aware of local needs and the specificity of each community and have programs that meet those specific needs. Thank you. A few minutes left. We have time to do a third reduced question round. I have Mr. Bélanger, Mr. Beaulieu, and Mr. Villeneuve on the list. 2.5 minutes. And first, Mr. Bélanger. Thank you, Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. We all agree that the Prime Minister plays an important role, and it's important to speak both official languages. It's important to promote the language in our institutions. I'm interested in the payment of bilingualism. I'm trying to see where we are now to know where we're going. What percentage of federal civil servants get the bilingualism bonus? Answer: I don't have the numbers, but we can find them for you. I don't have them off the top of my head. Question: all right. Let's say where I'm from, in Greater Sudbury, and I go to Service Canada, and I can't be served in the official language of my choice, which is French. How many employees, or what percentage of employees, need to be there to meet my needs? What percentage of employees need to be bilingual? Answer: I don't think that there's a formula. In the office, they must be able to meet the needs in the official languages, to meet the needs of the clients in the official language of their choice. In Service Canada Sudbury, there will be several bilingual people, but I don't think that there's a formula or a percentage of employees who need to be bilingual, but there needs to be an institutional capacity. Question. Let's say I'm in Quebec City and I switch it up. What are my chances of being served in English? 30 seconds. Answer. Ask Mr. Beaulieu. Inaudible. Question. Are there jobs in the federal government that don't require bilingualism? Answer. Yes, there are a whole series of posts that are designated as bilingual in certain regions. 10 seconds. If they don't give services to the public, the job may not be designated as bilingual. Thank you, Mr. Bélanger. Now, Mr. Villeneuve, 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much. Hello, Mr. Theberge. Thank you for being with us this morning. Thank you all for being here. It's the first time that I've spoken with you. As it's your last appearance in this committee as commissioner, well, we never know, maybe you'll come back. In closing, do you have a specific message to send out or things to keep in mind in order to protect and value our 2 official languages? Answer, thank you. I think it's really important to recognize that the Act exists because there are communities that use those official languages. Having the Act just to have a bilingual federal service is one thing, but it's there to make sure that communities that use minority languages can develop. So it's really important that there are the necessary means at communities' disposal, be it by action plans, be it by a modernized act with robust implementation measures in order to have an impact. It's also really key. It will be key over the next 8 years to evaluate the impact of the Act on communities. Because we're supposed to review the law. So starting now, we need to have indicators of the impact of this Act on our communities. Communities will always progress. In Saint-Anne-des-Chênes in Manitoba, when I was a little boy, that community doesn't exist. There's a new Francophone community. So we have to keep our finger on the pulse of these changes. The law changes, policies need to adapt based on changes in community. Finally, bilingualism, official languages. That's part of Canada's DNA. For 400 years, the 2 official languages have coexisted with Indigenous languages. That'll always be part of Canadian identity. We mustn't neglect it. We must embrace it. We must recognize the wealth of our 2 languages and the importance of French in Canada. Thank you. Do I have any time? Thank you, Mr. Theberge. Thank you, Mr. Villeneuve. Mr. Beaulieu, 1 minute, 15 seconds. Yes, not long ago we spoke to the president of the Treasury Board. He doesn't speak French. Do you think that's okay? Answer, as I said earlier, I think it's important for all leaders to be able to communicate in both official languages. And I dare to hope that eventually Mr. Ali will be able to communicate in both official languages. Question. Well, it's even more surprising because he said he knows other languages, but he doesn't know French. It shows that it's not really a priority for him, it would seem. There's a press conference regarding the agency that buys defense, just English, no translation. Is that acceptable? Answer, it's not acceptable. We received a complaint. Question, 20 seconds, 20 seconds. I'll take advantage of this opportunity to say that you often repeat that we need to debunk myths. But those who say that Anglophones are poor and Francophones, well, that's a myth because they use linguistic indicators that give those results. The median, etc. But when we look at the language used at home or the working language, it's the opposite, and the Anglophones have a clear advantage. What do you think of that? Answer. Inaudible. Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. Your time is up, says the chair. That's the end of our meeting today. First, thank you, Mr. Theberge, and to your team, for everyone around the table here. I know there are many next to you that work with you, and I know there are others who are supporting you every day. Thank you for your work. I'm the chair of the Official Languages Committee. I've only been in this role for a few months, but you've done really important work for many years in order to support official languages in Canada. And on behalf of the committee, I would like to thank you for your service to the official languages and to Canada. And thank you for sharing your work with us. That's all helped us to work more effectively to support official languages. So on behalf of the committee, thank you very much. Thank you to your team as well for their work, for your work. I think we can say that you've had a really important impact on our country. I know that the government has announced its intention to appoint a new commissioner. We'll see if that'll be the case. On behalf of the committee, good luck for your next steps. Thank you. A few words in closing. This is the last meeting before Christmas holidays, so thank you to my colleagues from all parties for your work together. I'm looking forward to working with you after the holidays, and it's an honor for me to be chair of this committee and work with you. I'd also like to ask that we thank the people that make this committee's work possible. Yes, the MPs on the camera and Hansard, but there are a lot of people who work to support us. First off, I'd like to thank the clerk, Madeline, and our analyst, Lucy. And I don't know all the names of everyone who works with us, but our interpreters, the people who help us with tech, logistics, everything that's necessary for the committee to work effectively. Thank you very much. I'd also like to take a moment to thank the interpreters. Yes, I mentioned them. Good point. Thank you. And I'd also like to thank, as you know, all the MPs depend upon their own team, employees that work with us. And so thank you to all staffers for your work, your very important work this year. Lastly, I know they're not always here, but everyone who works on official languages in Canada, be they minority communities who come to appear before us, be they other experts, be they civil servants who are here during the last few meetings. I don't know if they're here, but if they're listening to us, if they're watching, maybe some of them are listening, I'd like to thank them for their work. So thank you, colleagues. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and we're adjourned.
Merci.